Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, back today with a Audio Amigo review for you guys. Today we're going to be looking at the first entry into the IEM space from gaming mousepad makers Padsmith. This is the logically named Padsmith IEM. It's priced at $115 US and features a hybrid configuration of a dynamic driver and a single microplanar. So right off the bat, I want to let you guys know, I'm a gamer, but I don't competitively game. So I can't really evaluate this set based on its competitive gaming performance. I just don't have the knowledge, the skill, the breadth, or the talent to do that kind of thing. But what I can do is give this thing one hell of a shakedown when it comes to how it performs musically. That said, I'm going to be keeping sort of long gaming sessions in mind as sort of the primary use case for these. So my review might be slightly different from my usual ones, but you know, I'll do my best. So let's see if Padsmith's first foray into IEMs is a nice firm step forward, or if they're going to stumble out of the blocks. As usual, before we get started, a quick disclaimer. This IEM was sent to me by Padsmith for review. Clank on Twitter was asking for IEM reviewers who could review the IEM from a musical standpoint, and I went ahead and threw my hat into the ring. Next thing I knew, here it was. I'm not being paid for this review, and as always, my opinions are my own, but because I could technically turn around and sell this for money if I wanted, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency, especially when there's potential bias besides my own personal tastes at play. Thank you so very much to Clank and the entire team at Padsmith for sending me this set, and thank you all for watching and for all your support. So let's start off with the unboxing experience. I would say it's a pretty good first impression. As I mentioned in my unboxing video, which I'll put up there, the unboxing here reminds me a lot of a sort of FiiO audio set. You have the IEMs already on their cable on the right-hand side, and you have the case on the right with everything in it. Once you do open the case, the packaging gets a little, I would say, Spartan for the price point. All you'll find inside is these white silicone ear tips in this hard-to-open sort of angel ears style case, which is Padsmith branded, which I like. But you get small, medium, and large of these white ear tips in what I would say is a fairly standard bore diameter. And that's basically it. The case is very large and very sturdy. I like this style of case. I've seen it on other IEMs before. The printing is a bit off-center, but that's honestly kind of normal for chi-fi cases that have this sort of case on them. The case itself is very large. I wouldn't think it's pocketable unless you have, big boy pants. But it's big enough to fit, like, the ear tips plus a small DAP, and then still have enough room in the roof for the IEMs. You can put these up here. You can even fit two players side by side if you really wanted to, and still have room up here for things. It makes it for a good travel case. And I will say, I'm not too disappointed that it's only like a case and the tips. I've seen IEMs that cost much more than this from other brands. Ziigaat, Kiwi Ears, a couple of other brands I feel have sets that cost 2 to 3 times what this set costs and will give you an identical accessories package. The case will be a standard case and you'll get a standard single set of ear tips. So I'm not going to be docking Padsmith any points here. I personally would have liked to have seen a second ear tip option, maybe some wider bore tips to play with the sound of the IEMs a little bit. And y'all know me, I'm a sucker for modular cables, so having a modular cable would have been nice. But honestly, I think overall it's a good accessories package, but it's not great. Let's take a closer look at that cable. I kind of like the cable. I've seen a similar design on other IEMs, and it's one that I generally like. It's a light white, sort of silvery cable. It's a 4-wire braid that breaks up into 2-wire twists at the Y-split. The plastic coating on the wire feels very nice in the hands. It doesn't come across as rubbery or sticky. It feels actually quite easy and slick, and it's a very light cable. It's not super heavy or anything. The 3.5mm connector here is all metal, and it has nice Padsmith branding on it. I do wish it had a bit of a contour or a dip in it to help pull it out of very heavy or stubborn connectors, but honestly, it's fine. The Y-split here matches the construction of the connector down to the little taper on the end there. The chin slider is the 2-hole design, which, as you guys know, will not sit flat against the Y-split unless you sort of force the wires apart, and even then it comes off pretty easily. That does bother me a bit. If they had used the slotted design that I've seen, it would have been a bit better, but, can't really complain too much about it. The chin slider is easy to move up and down the wires. You put some tension on it, it will stay in place. The 2-pin connectors match the rest of the hardware. They have that little taper on the end. They have the cuts there. The only issue I have with these is that the L and R indicator is the tiny dot on the front of the housing there. It's not a huge deal. These already come with the wire on them in the package, so it's not like you're going to need to assemble these or you're going to have any chance of assembling them wrong. They already come assembled. It's just a small thing if you're going to be swapping cables. A more prominent right or left stereo indicator on there would be nice. Overall, I would say it's a very nice cable. I like that it's kind of lightweight, which is good for wearing for long periods of time. I do wish it came in some other terminations. Maybe offer a 4.4 millimeter option. I know more and more gamers are having desktop DAC amps on their desks for their audio solution. So having a 4.4 millimeter and having people be able to use balanced, even though it's not needed on these, would be nice. While I'm at it, modular would be really cool just to have. One other small note, I don't know why they used recessed 2-pin sockets if the IEM doesn't have a recessed 2-pin connector. So as you can see on this other one here, when you have it in there, the clear white bit sticks out a bit prominently. I personally would have preferred to have seen the metal up against it flush. So yeah, don't know why they use recessed, but it's a nitpick. It's not a real complaint. So let's get into the construction. These are full resin shells with the nozzles designed as part of the lower shell here. The nozzles, as you can see, have a sort of black mesh filter on them. When it comes to ventilation, as you can see, there's no front vent on these. But I wouldn't worry if you're pressure sensitive, because if I grab my flashlight here, see if I can show this on camera. If you look, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Let's see. There. You can sort of see it there. Yes, there. Okay. So you can see the sound tube for the dynamic driver coming through there. You can see there's a tube that connects the sound tube to the dynamic driver to the rear volume. So it's a sort of bass bypass tube for the dynamic driver, and that connects the front volume of the dynamic driver to the vent here closer to the 2-pin connector. That other vent, by the way, is specifically for the microplanar, which you can see sort of there in the housing even without the light. And there it is. Yeah, you can see it better without the light. But yeah, I had zero pressure buildup issues with these, no driver flex either. There's no other venting or I would say air-related design features on these. These are fairly typical resin IEMs as you would find at this price point. I couldn't make out any seams where the faceplate meets the bottom shell, so that is an indication that they're fairly well built. I expect these to be about as durable as any other resin IEMs, and I couldn't see any flaws in the resin itself, so overall I would say well done. Let's bring up the specs on these. The Padsmith IEM is a hybrid, but rather than using a dynamic and a balanced armature, they're using a 10mm titanium dome dynamic driver and a microplanar, which is super interesting to me for two reasons. Number one, y'all know I'm a planar fanboy, and yeah, I know it's not a full range planar, but microplanars count. I would consider a microplanar more of a planar than those annular planars or the flat planars that other companies use. And two, the microplanar IEMs I have tried so far have generally impressed me in terms of their technical performance. It's, in my opinion, nicer in my ears than a balanced armature, and it's getting, in my opinion, again, pretty close to an EST. So we'll see how the technology develops. But, back to specs. The nozzles on the Padsmith are a little over 6 mils in diameter and are a tiny bit on the shorter side. The internal diameter of the nozzle is 4.7 millimeters for those who are going to replace the filter or add filters to these. The shells are nice and light at 4.4 grams each. That combined with the nozzles should bode fairly well for comfort, but we'll see that later. In terms of drivability, these shouldn't have any issues running out of your motherboard's audio jacks or your front panel jacks. The relatively low impedance and sensitivity meant that I had no issues using these with my laptop, an older motherboard I have on my server, or my Sony Xperia X compact phone. The stock cable has an impedance of 0.4 ohms, but if you're going to upgrade cables, keep in mind that the Padsmith IEM does change frequency response when exposed to higher impedance sources or cables. I'll talk about exactly how a little bit later, but you can see there treble minus, and that'll give you an idea. Overall, this is the first DD plus microplanar combo coming across the review table, and I'm excited to get into it. But now it's time for the cool wall. Padsmith's mouse pads are, in my opinion, some of the cooler looking, they have some really cool designs on them. Conradi, I hope I'm really saying that right. I apologize if I've butchered your name. He's their in-house graphic designer and artist, and I kind of dig his style. He's got this box has like a Pink Floyd-ish water wave moon thing going on. I like it. Looking at the mouse pads on their site, I think they look really cool. I think the IEM itself is also really well done. I like purple as a color choice personally, and the subtle swirl effect that is on here is pretty cool. Like other IEMs that have swirls like this, each one is unique, so this swirl pattern will be slightly different to everybody else's swirl pattern, which gives you a little bit of a unique touch. I like that. I also kind of like the pyramid logo. I didn't see it anywhere else on the Padsmith website. I think maybe the Padsmith hammer logo that's also on their website, I'll go ahead and put one up here if I can find it, would have been maybe a bit cooler. But overall, I really dig the design on these. I'm going to stick these in cool. One thing I'll say is I would like to see some more colorways in the future. Gamers like to match the colors of their builds, and I think that would be super cool. You could get a little bit more personalization going. My personal computer, I went with white and black with gold accents. So my computer goes with everything, but people with red or blue builds might want a more red or blue option for their IEMs. Just something to consider. But let's see how the Padsmith IEM fares versus the famous Council of Ladies. So right off the bat, we're doing pretty good. We've got 4 pretties and a meh. If you're watching this, Padsmith, and I think you might be, that's just lady number 4. She's known for her extremely discerning taste. She's kind of the gatekeeper of the 5 out of 5 score on this test. So this is typical. Don't feel bad. 4 to 1 is very common. As far as if they would give out compliments for wearing these, we have a 3-2 vote in favor of compliments here. So we're still looking pretty good overall. Finally, let's get to their thoughts. It seems like the ladies really love the purple swirls, and hey, the pyramid logo seems to be getting some love as well. So well done, guys. Let's chat about comfort. I feel like this is super important for something gaming focused. It doesn't matter how nice it sounds. If you can only use it for 20-30 minutes, maybe an hour maximum, you need practice time. And a comfortable IEM that you can wear for 4, 5, 8 hours is going to help a lot with that. I mentioned it earlier, but the 8.8 grams of combined shell weight for these, and the fact that the nozzles are a somewhat normal size and shape, meant that I was able to wear these for a nice 6-hour fast food simulator session with my friends, had no comfort issues. The cable, as I mentioned, is really nice and lightweight. The coating on the ear hooks feels nice on the ears. And the shape, is fairly basic, but it has a bit of a comfort wing. It was very nice in my ears. There's no hard edges or, annoying bulges like some other ones can have. It's a fairly standard shape, except for the comfort wing. And, the shape worked out well because my wife actually really, really liked the fit on these. These passed the Tiny Ears test with flying colors. She had these on for a full workday of meetings, on Zoom constantly all day. Experienced no ear fatigue, no comfort issues. She was able to form and maintain a seal with no problems even when talking or eating. The nozzles took her super small Spinfit ear tips just fine, and she could get a sort of deeper fit than normal with them, which is, odd for her. And yeah, she commented she really liked how these fit. All right, but let's get on to how these sound. If you are a regular viewer of the channel, you will have seen my CVJ Night Elf video and how I did a Oops All Anime Songs for that video. Seeing as this is a gaming-focused IEM, we're going to go with Oops All Game Soundtracks today, so we'll go ahead and get started with the bass. The Padsmith IEM has a pretty fun bass boost going on. The kind of wild sub-bass square wave generated by the MOS Technologies 6581 sound interface device at the beginning of the theme to Monty on the Run for the Commodore 64 has a really pleasing electronic style rumble to it. I feel like on some more neutral or IEMs that have a bass roll-off, you can barely even feel that square wave. But on the Padsmith IEM, it comes through really nicely without getting overbearing or really annoying in your ears with the extra air pressure. Very good balance here. Bass guitars and kick drums sound really energetic and fun through this set. The Only Thing They Fear Is You from the Doom Eternal soundtrack has really good punch, good slam, really nice guttural replay on there. The distortion on the low bass guitar notes feels really visceral and satisfying. You get the punchiness from the kick drums. It stays prominent even when the track is at its loudest. I would say the bass response on the Padsmith IEM is a lot of fun. It doesn't get too boomy, overwhelming, or pillowy. It can be a little bit soft, but overall the texture is great and it feels very controlled overall. Next up, we have the mid-range. The mids on the Padsmith IEM are slightly impacted by that boosted bass, but it's in a way that I personally enjoy. I like it when the lower mids are fuller, richer, have a little bit of body to them. I've used this example before, but D'Angelo's voice in Unshaken from Red Dead Redemption 2, I feel like his voice and that whole song in general really benefits from the warmer lower mid-range here. You get a bit of extra gravity and husk to his voice that really helps it stand out in this track with all the drums and guitars going. Instruments in general were very easy to separate in the mix on this set. I didn't experience any masking, which is where one instrument can sort of cover up another in a similar frequency group. Female vocals here are a bit forward. I feel like they have just enough emphasis to have them come through really well on this set. A great example would be Ali's vocals in Flying to Your Heart from the Gitaruman soundtrack for the PS2. That song is essentially a sort of music battle between a synthesizer, who's the bad guy, and Gitaruman with his guitar. And you have Ali's great vocals laid over them. The synth is airy and energetic. The distortion on the guitar is nice and grainy. And then over the top of it all, like I said, you have Ali's beautiful vocals, especially at the big harmony at the very end with all three going together. I feel like her smooth, extended vocals are clear, clean, and they manage to stand out above the guitar and the synthesizer that are sort of harmonizing along with her. Yeah, the mid-range is great on this set. Everything feels really nicely balanced. Female vocals are maybe a little bit forward, but it doesn't throw anything out of balance, and I personally enjoy that. The upper mids and treble, again, are very well controlled. The microplanar here has been tuned well. I think it might be crossed over at around 2.5 kilohertz, but don't quote me on that, that's just a guess. Female vocal harmonics are natural and tonally correct sounding to me, with no off-tonality or overblown emphasis to them at all. Ellen McLean's digitized voice in Portal 2's Cara Mia Adio, better known as the turret opera from the end, is, I think, very wonderfully recreated by the Padsmith IEM. You have her already famous operatic vocals. They're enhanced by some digital effects, which means the harmonics are actually going to be super important because that's where all the effects are going to do their thing. In terms of experiencing the full magnitude of the song, I think that this set did a really, really good job with the harmonics, especially on things like the servo motors at the beginning of the track. The decay on the harmonics feels just right. I don't think they overstay their welcome. I didn't find them fatiguing at all either. It was actually quite nice. When it came to sort of instrument and percussion harmonics, same thing, weren't fatiguing at all. I decided to use the Zerg 3 theme from the original StarCraft soundtrack. At the very beginning, there are some bell or chime-like tones that echo. They come in at several fundamental frequencies and then they throw out harmonics. According to my spectrogram, the highest of those notes is actually right at around 8.89 kilohertz, and then it throws off high harmonics that I could see in like the 14-15 kilohertz range. This set did a really good job of playing those tones without, again, causing any fatigue. At least to my ears, I think it was a very smooth presentation. On that track, once the electronic drums come in, you get more of that wonderful 80s style, electronic snare. It has a really fast decay to it. The microplanar did great with that. I feel like the treble range here is very, very well controlled. It's sort of relaxed, but also detailed. It's a great replay without being too fatiguing or tonally compromised. Very natural sounding, upper mids and treble. Overall, I like it. Moving on to the technical performance. The titanium dynamic driver, I feel, does a great job at resolving low-frequency events. I already brought up how well it does with low-frequency square waves on the SID chip, but I also think it does a good job with subtle low-end orchestral details. The orchestral version of the theme to the original Deus Ex, which came with the PS2 version, but I played the PC version, has a giant orchestral bass drum in it, and you guys know how much I love those. At the beginning of the track, the hits are actually really easy to hear. They're only really sharing space with the oboe. But once the rest of the orchestra gets going, they're still very clearly audible in the background, and you can make out the details with the Padsmith IEM. I think it does very well here. For the mid-range, I'm going to throw in a bonus track here. I usually just do low and high, but, Floral Fury from the Cuphead soundtrack, I think sounded fantastic on this. The whole big band soundtrack from Cuphead, I think, is a great test for mid-range instrument detail, separation, and dynamics across the whole range. As I said, replay is really good. Everything from the big drums and the bongos to the cuica that's making the sort of monkey-ish noises, I think sounds really clean. There's a subtle guitar on that track, as well as a little triangle that's jamming out, but you know kind of have to listen for it. Padsmith had no issues rendering any of those details, the guitar, the triangle, and as I said earlier, there was no masking at all here, even with the whole brass section going all together. Moving to the higher end of the scale, I continue to be impressed by microplanars. I think their overall detail resolution is pretty killer. The Metroid Prime staff roll slash, what people call the credits theme, I think sounded really, really nice through these. You have the theremin style medley and all the supporting effects and the little nuances in the top end that are really beautifully rendered here. You have some subtle cymbals in the background and then the Chozo style chanting. It's a hauntingly beautiful track in my opinion. You also have piano going on in the higher registers, and I think all of it comes through very, very well on the high end. In terms of overall technicalities when compared to other hybrid IEMs, I would put this between the AFUL Explorer and the AFUL Performer 5. I would say it's a little bit closer to the Performer 5 than it is to the Explorer, though. When it comes to stereo separation, the Padsmith IEM does excellently. Que Sera Sera from the original Katamari Damacy soundtrack. It's kind of like a stereo playground. You've got the piano firmly in the left ear, and you've got the drums, the percussion, and other things sort of in the right. And it isn't until the vocals come in. Before that, it sounds very sort of disjointed. Then the vocals come in and gives you a firm center image for the sound, and it just sounds really, really great. Padsmith IEM did great, replayed the track really nicely. It didn't feel closed in or claustrophobic in the slightest. In terms of perceived 3D soundstage, this IEM does an excellent job, as I would expect from a sort of gaming-focused IEM. That the Daniel Indart project's Como Te Gusta from the original Tropico, I feel, is a very beautifully mastered track. His whole company's purpose is to recreate Latin music for games as realistically and as wonderfully as possible, and he nails that in the mastering. With highly resolving headphones, you can close your eyes and just place the band around you. The piano is sort of off to the front left, the drums and percussion sort of fill in the space behind you. You've got the bongos on the left, the rest of the kit in the middle, some different drums to your right. The horns are sort of front and left, vocals dead center. It feels like the band's sort of sitting around you. And I think the Padsmith IEM, in terms of recreating that band sitting around you experience, does a pretty good job. This set definitely does not hold back well-mastered tracks. I think it has really great soundstage imaging and an excellent job in terms of stereo, and does an excellent job in terms of stereo separation. Finally, let's discuss the effects of higher output impedance or using an impedance adapter on this IEM. So this is the graph for the Padsmith IEM and the Padsmith IEM with a 15 ohm impedance adapter. And as you can see, below 2.5 kilohertz, the effect is what I would call barely even noticeable. Above 2.5 kilohertz, though, the energy up there becomes increasingly attenuated as the frequencies rise. So if you're using these on a mobile device for gaming, or you feel like you're losing some of the top-end detail, it might be your source. On the other hand, if you're extremely treble sensitive and you find these too airy or fatiguing, then maybe I would try putting an impedance adapter on them to tone down those upper frequencies. That said, I personally would stick to a low output impedance source for these to get the best detail retrieval and imaging performance on these. Like I said, I didn't find these fatiguing at all, so I would just forego the impedance adapter here. So, the Padsmith IEM. I would describe the tuning here as a sort of warmish neutral or like warmish mild V-shape. This isn't a Harman type tuning like the Supermix 4 or the Truth Year Zero Blue. I also do consider it to be straight up warm because it actually has, a decent amount of energy through the upper mids and treble. It has too much bass to be considered a bright set. But what I've done here is I've lined up some good comparisons, two of which are what I keep hearing are some of the best gaming IEMs out there. And I have a budget option, so we'll go ahead and kick things off with that. So we're going to use our imaginations for a little bit. Like with the KE4, the set I'm going to talk about is on loan. But I did do my comparison listening for these two beforehand, and I'm going off of my detailed notes. So we're going to go ahead and pretend that this 0 is actually a 0.2. Because the 0.2 and its sort of warmish, neutralish tuning is actually quite similar to the Padsmith IEM. In terms of, detail retrieval, imaging, build quality, and accessories, obviously the Padsmith IEM is going to walk all over the 0. But, you'd expect that with the price gulf between these two being what it is. The 0.2 is, I think, 25 bucks. The 0.2 actually has a bit more sub-bass rumble to it and a tiny bit more harmonic energy overall. Honestly, though, I think if you're on a budget and you want sort of the general sound the Padsmith IEM can offer you, losing a bit of that imaging and soundstage, but keeping the overall tuning, the Zero 2, remember we're pretending, continues to be a solid choice at $25. So next up, our first gaming contender, and in what my opinion is the Padsmith's closest rival. This is the Simgot EM6L Phoenix. Longtime viewers will know that the Phoenix has been my favorite Simgot IEM until very recently when it was dethroned by the spellbinding Simgot ET142. But outside of that, the EM6L seems to get recommended a lot as a great IEM for gaming by some of my peers. In terms of music, the EM6L comes across to me as a less vocal forward, brighter, airier version of the Padsmith IEM. So what I'll say off the bat, and I'll say this a lot, so get used to it, if you tried the EM6L and you found it too bright or fatiguing, the Padsmith could be exactly what the doctor ordered. The extra treble energy on the Phoenix here can lead to the interpretation of more detail. The Phoenix also has an extra crossover point, meaning that its DD has to do less work than the one in the Padsmith. I don't know exactly where the points are, but that's the effect that I get from listening. The DD can focus more on the lower frequencies. The bass quantity on these two is largely similar, but I feel like the bass quality on the EM6L is slightly better. I said earlier that the Padsmith IEM could get a little bit soft in some tracks, and that's only after comparing it to the EM6L. The EM6L is just that little bit sharper in the low end compared to the Padsmith IEM. At the top end, I honestly don't feel that the microplanar is lacking in terms of detail and resolution compared to the two balanced armatures that the Simgot has up there. In fact, I think the microplanar matches them in terms of pure technical prowess. But there is extra energy, like I said, in the upper mids and treble here. And what that does is it pushes those details that are there on both of these. It pushes them more forward than they feel on the Padsmith IEM. Now, that does make the Phoenix more fatiguing. And while I personally have never found the EM6L Phoenix to be fatiguing, there are a lot of people out there who do. And that's the essential difference between these two. The EM6L will push details a bit more forward than the Padsmith, which results in better imaging. It also has better bass quality. The Padsmith IEM does not lack in terms of details and is 100% the more relaxing listening experience. What this boils down to is, if you're treble sensitive, grab the Padsmith IEM, it's excellent. If you're not treble sensitive or you prefer a brighter, airier sound, the EM6L is the choice for you. Which one you're going to prefer, honestly, is going to come down to your treble tolerance, your library, and other factors. So we're going to go from these two being essentially the same price, and we're going to jump up in price all the way up to the AFUL Performer 5. Yes, I know that's the Performer 7 box. I don't have the Performer 5 box. I'm sorry. The Performer 5 at MSRP is $220 US, but ever since the Performer 7 came out, I've seen these drop all the way down to 140 bucks. So it's a bit more relevant in this comparison than you might think off the top of your head. The Performer 5 is a bit more of a neutral tuning compared to the Padsmith. It has less mid-bass punchiness and a bit more treble to sort of even the signature out. It comes off more neutral-ish. Like the EM6L, the Performer 5 has an extra set of drivers to help the dynamic driver out. So again, although the bass quantity on the Performer 5 is lower, I feel like the bass quality on the Performer 5 is maybe a bit better. The lower mids on the Padsmith IEM are richer and more full-bodied than on the Performer 5, but as I mentioned earlier, some folks prefer the leaner sound over the sort of warmer, richer sound. I would say these two are very similar in terms of overall treble energy, but the Performer 5 comes off a bit smoother, a bit more detailed, a bit airier. But at almost double the price, I would expect that sort of increase in performance. I do think that these two are different enough in sound signature that folks will be choosing the Padsmith when they want that extra bassiness and something a bit warmer. But I wanted to show that the Performer 5 on sale can represent a decent alternative if you're sort of in this price bracket and you're looking for something maybe a little bit more neutral in terms of a hybrid. Finally, we have the other gaming contender, and I don't think these are necessarily a straight-up competitor for the Padsmith, as again, the sound signature is different and the price is much higher. But I wanted to bring these up because they also get recommended all the time for gaming. I'm talking, of course, about the $250 Ziigaat collaboration with fresh reviews, the Arete. So the Arete is most similar to the Performer 5 in terms of tuning. So the Padsmith IEM has similar advantages and disadvantages, to when it's compared to the Performer 5. The Padsmith has more bass, but it's less controlled. It also has a bit of extra richness in the lower mids, which again, some people like myself will prefer. In the treble, when it comes to overall tuning, the Arete is actually closer to the Padsmith than it is to the Performer 5, in my opinion. The Arete might be a tiny bit airier at the very top, but other than that, these two are actually extremely similar. If you prefer the warmer lower mids and the punchier mid bass, I think the Padsmith could represent a good value alternative to the Arete. But honestly, if you want that sort of clean and relaxed at the same time with a little bit less brightness, the Arete is still tops and is an absolutely fantastic set. So I'm going to try and do something a little bit different for my wrap-up here. First thing I'm going to do is flash up the graphs for the Arete, the EM6L, and the Padsmith IEM. I'm doing this because I want to illustrate something. The Padsmith IEM, in terms of tuning, is kind of like the love child of the EM6L and the Arete. You've got EM6L in the bass and lower mids, and you've got Arete in the upper mids and treble. I just wanted to point out that if you think the Arete is lacking in mid-bass punch, or you think that the EM6L is too bright and fatiguing, the Padsmith IEM is a very compelling middle ground option in terms of tuning. Now, the next thing I wanted to do, go away graph, was talk about imaging and soundstage, since I know some gamers are watching this and you're going to want to know how these do in games. As I've said many times, and as you can tell from the songs I chose for my presentation here, all the games I play are single-player, story-based, not competitive at all. There's no competitive FPS happening here. Listening to audio cues is not important for my gaming experience. However, when I'm listening to my live albums or other tracks that are extremely well mastered with lots of spatial information, I honestly don't find any of these to be lacking in any way. And I would say that all four of these are above average in terms of IEMs for spaciousness. AFUL Performer may be a bit closer to average, but we'll get to that in a second. What I'm going to do is rank them for you guys in terms of overall imaging performance in my testing tracks. What I'm going to say is the gap from the narrowest to the widest sounding is extremely small, and you might not notice it depending on what songs you're listening to or what games you're playing. But I just wanted to rank them for you guys with my songs, with my opinion. So at the bottom, I have the Performer 5, which I think is, honestly, if I had to pick only one of these to daily drive, it would probably be the Performer 5, but it does have the most intimate soundstage out of these four. Next up is going to be the Padsmith IEM in second place. It's just a bit above the Performer 5 in terms of staging and imaging to me. Above that, I'm going to place the Arete. The Arete is, a step above this. It's still really nice. And then finally, the one that I think actually has the best imaging in my testing tracks is the EM6L. I'm going to give the win here. As I said, however, the gap from the EM6L's soundstage and imaging to the Performer 5's soundstage and imaging, in my opinion, really isn't all that huge. All of these will be great. All of these will immerse you in your music or into your game. And all of these, I feel, if the game is providing you spatial information, shouldn't let you down. But again, not a pro gamer, so take that with a massive fistful of salt. The other thing I will say is that when it comes to comfort, the things are a bit different. I had my wife wear each of these at work, and I basically had her write down what she thought, which one was the most comfortable, which one she could wear for the longest period, and the order changes a bit, and the order changes like this. The Performer 5 she thought was hilariously big for her ears. They didn't fit at all, and she couldn't wear them for longer than like 10 minutes. She couldn't maintain a seal with these. Similar on the Arete. She found the shells to be quite large, the nozzles to be a bit too short. She said she really couldn't get a fit on these, and it didn't work out for her. The EM6L did fit, but it was a weird fit. The design of the shells fit her ears almost perfectly, and the short nozzle sort of jammed her ear tip extremely shallow in her ear, but it was a very secure and very sturdy, shallow fit. The ear hooks on these also helped keep the shell in her ear very well. This was a good fit. It was comfortable, but not as comfortable as the Padsmith IEM, which, as I said, she wore for a whole day of meetings and had zero issues. And at the end of that day, she's like, these are easily the most comfortable of the four, and I could wear these for even longer if I wanted to. So in terms of comfort, the Padsmith takes the crown. Okay, so enough comparisons. Let's take these away and figure out where I'm going to put the Padsmith IEM on the famous Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale. This is honestly pretty easy for me, but I'm going to try to do my best to explain it as quickly as I can. Padsmith IEM basically does everything well. It's comfortable, it's well built, it has a nice cable, it sounds great, and it looks really nice to boot. It competes with the EM6L, which I think is an amazing set to be competing with. I love the EM6L. It might not beat the EM6L in every category, but it takes wins in terms of looks, comfort, and friendliness towards folks who are treble sensitive. Honestly, I see this as just a warmer, less intense version of the EM6L. And as I said earlier, if you're one of those people who had the EM6L but sold it or returned it due to the upper mids and treble fatigue, I think this is 100% worth a look. While it doesn't outright beat the EM6L in terms of sound, it's playing in the same ballpark. And for the first product from a mousepad company, I think that Padsmith did extremely well here. I'm going to be placing this in This is Brilliant. It just does a lot of things right for me. Sound has good body, detail retrieval is nice, overall value is pretty good. As I said, if it came in different colors like the Arete and came with some different, ear tips, maybe a modular cable, this would be an even more killer value. So, do I recommend the Padsmith IEM? From a purely musical perspective, yes, I do. This won't be for bass heads or treble heads. It's a bit too warm to be truly neutral, so if you want neutral, a treble headset or a bass headset, this won't be for you. But the warm, neutral signature is an extremely popular one for good reason. It's very friendly towards basically all ears, and I think that this is a good execution of that warmish neutral tuning. As I've said before, if you're a gamer who tried the EM6L and didn't like it because it was too bright, this is for you. Same basic sort of price, similar performance, similar sort of gaming prowess, let's say. This is also a good option if you really like the sort of 0-2 tuning and you want to upgrade to a hybrid. This is also, a microplanar in here. Well, I personally don't get any of that balanced armature timbre that some people go on about. I've never really heard it. Some people just don't like balanced armatures. This here is a hybrid with no balanced armatures, so it's an option if you have a strong dislike of balanced armatures. Overall, I think at $115, the Padsmith IEM competes very well with the other hybrid IEMs in the sort of $100 to $120 price range, and I think it's a good recommendation for those who are looking for a technically capable, extremely comfortable, well-designed IEM. And that's going to do it for me today. Sorry if this video is a little bit longer, since I thought I might have some newer viewers who might not be familiar with some of the terminology. I took a bit longer explaining some things musically than I typically do, but I want to make sure that everyone was on the same page in terms of what this thing can do musically. Once again, I want to say thank you to Clank and the rest of the team at Padsmith for sending this out for review. The only real recommendations I have for you guys would be to look into some options in terms of wide bore ear tips. For users who want to boost the treble response or increase some of the detail at the top end, wide bore tips can help a lot. I would also see if you guys can offer a cost-effective modular cable. As I said, more gamers are having DACs and amps with balanced outputs on their setups, and it would just be nice to have the option for playing around with the balanced audio, even if it's not necessary from a drivability perspective. Oh yeah, and colors. More colors would be great. But yeah, that's basically all the advice I have. And for me, that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I'll catch you all next time.